In this next section, we're going to talk about the Wavefront device. This is the Wavefront 3000, the current generation of the Wavefront. The original design for the Wavefront was created by Andreas Marx, along with some help from Dr. Wolfgang Ludwig, a very famous biophysicist from Germany, who actually did the electronic design and also some of the physics behind it. But this is a very unique, very powerful device. It works in conjunction with the Avatar. It is not a testing device. It's designed to create energetic remedies that are custom for your patient right there on the spot. Energetic remedies would be akin to homeopathy. So the original concept of this and kind of the hallmark technology is something called inverting. And where this came from is Dr. Wolfgang Ludwig had done an experiment, I think this was one of his PhD thesis, where he was trying to figure out how is it that water manages to retain information. In other words, how does homeopathy work? And to do this, he built a laboratory. In this laboratory, if you can imagine it, they literally dug a deep hole up on the side of a hill in the Black Forest, away from any power line grids, away from as much electromagnetic interference as they possibly could. And then they buried a little closet-sized laboratory down in it. Now this thing had lead sheets along the walls to protect it. He also developed kind of a suit that had lead on it so it would keep his interference, his electromagnetics, from interfering with his measurements. And then what he tried to do is really determine what is the actual difference electromagnetically between a sample of water versus that same water that's been homeopathically prepared at a high potency. So that at high potency you no longer have a chemical effect, you just have some kind of an energetic signature. And he tried to measure those to see what's different from this to this. And what he found is that he couldn't determine any difference in that way. And that still stands today. There's no way to really see the difference between water and homeopathic high potency water electromagnetically. But there's something going on. So he kept doing experiments. And then he worked on a small chamber where he could create an electromagnetic field that was constantly pulsing. And that could be measured on an oscilloscope with instrumentation. So he could see what was going on inside the chamber. And inside that chamber, he could put a sample of something. So for example, if you took a sample of mercury, like just a drop of mercury, and introduced it into that field, he could measure it on his instrument and see that it would cause a disturbance. And the disturbance that's what he called it, the disturbance effect. And it was very much like if you have a nice, clear, cool pool of water, very still, and you throw a rock into it, it causes a ripple. Well, the thing that's really interesting about this is the ripple, the disturbance for mercury is unique. It's different than the disturbance would be for iron, or for a different heavy metal, or for a homeopathic remedy, for anything else. It's unique for that metal. The other thing, to give you an idea of what the disturbance would look like inside his oscilloscope, you have a XY grid, and the ripple would look something like that. I don't think that's the actual one for mercury, but something like that. What was really interesting is that if you take that mercury and you start to prepare it homeopathically, so you dilute it 1 part per 10, so that's a 1x, and then you measure it inside this device, the ripple, the disturbance is identical, except for there might be a slight change in the fuzz within the ripple, but the ripple stays the same. Now, if you go to 2x, 3x, 4x, all the way up to 22x, that ripple remains constant in shape. Then at 23x, that ripple inverts itself 180 degrees, so that now it occurs with the same shape in the lower left quadrant. Same ripple, just inverted 180 degrees. Now, Dr. Ludwig said he's not sure why this occurs. It's just a phenomenon that occurs that he could witness. And he tested this at even very, very high potencies, up to 1,000 M. That's literally a 10 with 1,000,000 zeros behind it. And even at that high potency, it still retained that identical shape inverted in the 180 degree quadrant down here.
He did it with Nux Vomica.
He did it with Nux Vomica? Really?
1000x.
He did it at 1,000 M, he said also. He created a 1,000 M.
I have still the graphic of it from 1000x.
Really? Oh, fantastic. So, all right, so the application of this is the Wavefront. And what this device literally does is it takes this principle and puts it into commercial usage. And it's just a treat to work with in a practice because what you can do with it. So this could be a sample of dust from somebody's home. You could collect this very easily from their vacuum cleaner. Just have them vacuum their rugs, and all of a sudden now you have a great sample of all the airborne particulates and pollens and hairs and everything else that occur in, in that household. So you can just take a little bit of that vacuum cleaner dust, drop it inside a nice little cheap sandwich baggie like this. You're just going to use this for this one purpose. And then you just literally stick this down inside the well. Now we put it inside a baggie so we don't leave that material all over the inside of the well. This is the input well. This is where you put your original sample. This over here is the receiver well. And here, you're going to put a bottle of something that you want to receive the inverted signal of this. This is where it goes to. So this is going to get that informational signal. You put this in this well. Now, what do you use here? Well, you can use anything, but the fact is it works better, we feel, to use something that's a water-based solution. It's also a good idea and recommended that you use something that's already in a manufactured, licensed, sealed bottle. So, if you're already giving your patient some kind of, for example, this is a drainage remedy, or some kind of a liquid general allergen remedy, or possibly some other kind of supplement that's liquid-based, that makes a perfect receiver. Now, why is it that you want to put it in there in a sealed bottle? Well, because the laws of the land say that you're not supposed to be putting stuff in bottles and selling it to your patients or clients. It's better to do something that's already a licensed bottle. So we put that in our receiver well, okay? Now, then all you have to literally do is make sure that this thing is switched to invert. I can show you here. This is the invert switch here. And then just hit the activate button. Now, while this is occurring, the device sets up and creates an electromagnetic field in here. In fact, it does it with 2 electromagnetic fields with dual antennas. Then it takes that information and pulls it into dual amplifier circuits. Right after that, it inverts it 180 degrees based on the work of Dr. Ludwig and his experiments. Then it broadcasts that, it amplifies it again, and broadcasts it into this well where we set up another electromagnetic field, making the information from here available in the inverted form over here. The water in this bottle, along with everything else, will pick up that informational signal. It takes about 12 seconds to actually run the circuitry through. We'll do it one more time to just show you. And again, it's doing all that constantly once you hit that start button. Now, what's transferred is not the chemistry of this. We're not worried about that. We're worried about the informational signal from this inverted over to here. Once it's done, you take this bottle, and then you succuss it like you would a homeopathic. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now it's ready for their patient. So Andreas, that's an example of using a sample of dust from somebody's household. What would be some other examples that you could use for using the invert circuit?
Okay. You were talking about airborne allergies. There's another unique method you can use with a Scotch tape. And every patient, it's easy to do, can do this. So you take a Scotch tape and you make the sticky side outside, make a loop with it. And then you could attach this to your outside of your bedroom window. You could also put it on the hood of your car.
And then when you drive around or when the wind blows, it's going to blow all the pollen from your neighborhood.
That's exactly. It will collect for a day or two a lot of airborne dust particles.
A lot of pollen.
And pollens in particular, to the allergy season. And so then have the patient put it in an envelope.
Same thing. You can use a paper envelope, you can use a plastic envelope.
And so, because it's very sticky, you want to put it into something. And then, same here, we place it into the input well, make sure that we press invert, and then any carrier solution, such as a homeopathic or a remedy, we prefer liquids.
Something that's water-based.
Right. You put it in the output well, you start it, let it run its circle, and as Bob showed you, succuss it 10 times, and then you made an individual remedy with the airborne particles in the environment of the patient. Very specific to help to antidote in the homeopathic way,
Hay fever.
for example, hay fever?
Yeah, exactly. So a couple things we should mention are, a lot of people ask, what potency does the device say? Is it a 30x?
Okay.
No, it's not. It's
Right.
over 20, it's 23x above, but it's just kind of a general energetic signal like higher potency homeopathics.
I love the word signal. It's an impulse signal to the body, and the body will react to it.
Another thing that Dr. Ludwig taught us is, this is a brilliant man. It was fascinating working with him, but you know, what he really believed that homeopathy does, it's not a chemical effect, but what it's giving is information. It's kind of like if you're driving down the road in Las Vegas, where I'm from, there are a lot of billboards. Billboards with casinos and shows and everything else imaginable. And when you're driving down the road, you really take all of it for granted. You don't pay attention to it until something catches your eye. Like you say, oh, they got a deal over, they got a show coming up, and that's one of my favorite, performers. And all of a sudden you read it and you really look at the date, and you weren't even thinking about that guy, but all of a sudden that just made you zero in on it. It made your body think like, I got to do something. I got to get tickets to see that guy. Well, homeopathy is a little like that. You may have something going on in your system that the way your body deals with it is kind of asleep to it, or it's become sort of relaxed to it.
It basically is a resonance phenomena, if you really think about it. It creates a resonance. The impulse, the signal will create a resonance, and this resonance, one could say in energetic medicine, healing is a resonance phenomenon.
But it's not the homeopathic that actually does the work. It stimulates the body's response.
It's a trigger.
It's a trigger, yes, but it's a very targeted, very directional, very specific trigger. So that's kind of the magic of it. Now, is this going to be as effective as homeopathy? Well, here's how I feel about it is. If you went out in your backyard, if you had hay fever, and you took and collected a large sample of all the pollen from your backyard, and it would take you days to get enough, and then you soak that in alcohol, and then you filter out all the solids, so you've got a mother tincture. That's how you make a mother tincture. Then you take an amount of that, and you add 9 amounts of water alcohol, and then you pound that. That's a 1x. And then you do that over and over and over again until you've got like a multiple high potency combination remedy. If you did that for your patient or yourself, and then you took that remedy, if you respond well to that, you will respond just as well to this consistently. And this takes about 20 seconds. So
yeah, I have some, for
simple.
example, I have some friends, and they bring me some cat hair when they have visitors coming to their home. They say, because my uncle or my child or whatever is allergic to cat hair. So then I'll take some of the cat hair and we make an inversion.
Put a cat hair in the bag, drop it down the well.
And as soon as the doorbell rings, they step in, they get right away some drops, and they will be fine. Nothing is 100%, but we've seen it over and over again how effective that is. Why wouldn't I use something such a harmless? Why wouldn't I use a harmless procedure like this? It's great.
A couple of other options where we have a lot of dentists that buy this piece of equipment. They use it, for example, when they have a cavity that they clean out, where they'll take that actual necrotic material from underneath the tooth that they've cleaned, smear it on a glass slide, put it in a baggie, drop it in there, and invert that into a nice drainage remedy. But why do they do that? Well, they consistently see that the inflammation in that area where there was that infection drops much faster, the pain and swelling goes down much faster, the healing responds much more quickly. So, it has a lot of versatility. You could use it for, people use it with...
for example, here you see just a regular Q-tip. Any body secretion you can collect with a little Q-tip, put it also in a plastic bag. It could be even teardrops, earwax,
signs,
out of your nose, mouth. You could even use some urine, because particular urine therapy, inversion of what's in urine, helps very much against allergies.
Really?
Yeah, it's a great thing. They use to homeopathically prepare urine, and we know even in India or some Ayurvedic methods, and they drink a little bit of their urine. We don't want to do this in America, but you can use the signal of the urine or the information of the urine and invert it and create a therapeutic signal.
And that would be like an isotherapy, correct?
You could compare that
Yeah,
with that.
okay.
And a very other unique thing I would like to share with you. When I have patients come in who smokers and they don't want to, they in an anti-smoking program, they want to stop smoking, we may do some acupuncture. And then what we do is we let them smoke their last cigarette outside, give them a glass of water or a little bottle, and then whenever they take a puff and they exhale through the straw in the water glass.
So they're smoking their cigarette, they take a nice deep puff on their drag on their cigarette, and then they blow it out through the straw to the water.
Right there. After half, they don't even need to smoke the whole cigarette. The water will turn very gray. It has now, first of all, the information of their particular brand of cigarettes, as well as what comes out of their lung. Then we use some of this water. We could fill it in an empty little glass vial.
If you had a little
or
glass
little
vial
bottle,
about this size, whatever you want to use.
and do the same procedure, put it in the input well, maybe use a lung remedy, like herbal extraction, which would be good for the lung tissue or the heart, etc., like Crataegus, for example. And we could put it right in the output well, and then do the same thing. See,
Use the invert
use
cycle.
the inversion, switch it on. It carries all the personal information from the lung.
How the person's reacting to those cigarettes as well as the actual cigarette material.
There's a lot of information. So to give the body an opposite signal.
Okay. There's one other thing I want to mention about the inverting. Something a lot of people have a question about is, if I put all my samples in a plastic bag or some kind of receiver bottle like glass or even plastic and put that in the well, isn't that information also going to the patient, and isn't that toxic? This is plastic.
Yeah. I'd love to say something to that. That's an interesting point. You just mentioned you see the billboards, but not every billboard will cause a reaction or resonance.
But you are seeing all the billboards.
You see them, but you have no reaction. With other words, if you give somebody the wrong homeopathic, the wrong signal, you have no reaction. That's why homeopathic is non-toxic. But if the right signal, which causes the resonance in your to you, then that could cause a healing reaction. That could ignite a healing process, it's better to say. So with other words, the plastic, if you don't fall in resonance with it, doesn't mean anything. But the individual substance inside the plastic may be exactly what your body needs as a inverted signal.
You know, in reality, the wells on the wavefront are gold-plated. They're that so they're as least toxic as possible. That was a request of Dr. Ludwig.
The input and output well, inside the antenna, the metal is gold-plated. That has two reasons. It will not oxidize like other materials, so it keeps very clean.
So the wavefront was designed so that the wells, this is at the request of Dr. Ludwig, are gold-plated. Couple reasons. One, gold doesn't oxidize. You don't get any interference there. Number two is gold's very non-toxic, so it doesn't interfere. It interferes as least as possible. The other thing is the wells are actually split. There's actually two electromagnetic antennas in each well for a reason. If you use two antennae and pull them into that inverter circuit through the amplifiers, it cleans the signal. It basically cleans a lot of the fuzz or the kind of aberrant signal away from it, and you basically get a nice, clean, solid signal of the information that you really want. So information from the air, from outside, other electromagnetics that come inside the chamber are for the most part filtered out of the equation.
Yeah. And you see it clearly on an oscilloscope.
You do. You see it, you literally just highlights the line, just brightens it. It really focuses it. The next process that the wavefront offers is something called duplicating. Now, duplicating is basically the same process, except it doesn't invert. So we set up our electromagnetic field here, and you put your sample in. Now here, the sample is typically a homeopathic remedy that you want to duplicate. For example, I have a client from Sweden that purchased an Apotar wavefront combination just about a year ago. And she just sent me an email literally last night, this is true, And she said that she'd had a hard time getting a hold of certain remedies over in Europe because they're being outlawed in terms of manufacturing. And this was a very high potency Pasco remedy. And she was using it, the Wavefront, to duplicate that remedy because it's a very valuable remedy in her practice for the work that she does. She can't get the originals anymore, but she has a couple of samples like this. So you can take a sample homeopathic, even if it's just a test sample, drop it down inside the well. Then put your receiver solution here. It'll literally pick up that informational signal of this particular remedy, pull it into the circuitry, amplify it and send it over here, amplified, cleaned up, broadcast so that this can pick it up. Now you can do that over and over and over again. This process in no way damages or sucks the information out of this. It just picks up what's emanating off of it constantly.
Yeah. We also found that there's always a concern that when you fly in an airplane, you get X-rayed your remedies. And
oh yeah, through the X-ray scanners in an airline?
And then,
airport, excuse me.
Yeah, and so people are concerned, is this particular information still there? Is it kind of deleted? But the thing is, we found it doesn't affect this.
Well, it's partly because of the type of scanners they're a side scanning, so they're not such direct radiation.
They're on a different frequency band.
Right.
But to vitalize a remedy when you travel, it doesn't hurt to once in a while just succuss it.
So what you're saying is before you're going to use homeopathic or energetic remedies, just succuss it.
You don't need to do that every time when you take something.
Yeah, but it only takes a second, so it's not a bad idea.
Particularly when you travel, it's not a bad idea.
I think there's also something value in that. It kind of reprograms it to you also. It individualizes it for you. Okay.
Yeah, that's
amazing stuff. So that's the duplication circuit. The last option that this device offers is something called imprinting. Now, imprinting was developed quite a while back with the original computerized EAV devices, starting off with the old Intero. The people who invented that, guy named Roy Curtin, very brilliant guy, really understood a lot about energetic medicine. He is a physicist. And Roy understood that you can do things with these devices on a wave that normal science really couldn't quite understand how to prove this, but in terms of actual usage, it's very, very valuable. So using the Avatar software, you could go through the virtual library and get an understanding of what the person is actually reacting to in terms of different substances, different pathogens, and so on.
Yeah, by testing the points.
By testing the points, that's right. Much like you would remedy testing. Let's say in a specific case you determine that mercury is a factor. You can literally create a remedy of mercury right here. You put your receiver bottle in here again.
Like an antidote.
In fact, it doesn't even matter which mode you have this thing switched to. As soon as you activate the transmit signal, the device automatically from the computer sends a signal to the wavefront. The wavefront automatically switches into the right mode and completes the process.
Yeah, into an output well.
Into your receiver well. Again, once you're finished, take the bottle, go ahead and succuss it. Now you've got that very, very specific remedy for that patient.
Yeah, which you test out, and you can determine even different potencies, etc. And we understand, of course, there is no magical process here. It's the information what we are looking at. And although scientifically that cannot all be explained, but physicists came a long way, and they have some explanation. If we get into this, it would be just too lengthy. But the fact is the results. That's
well, one thing I can say about it is this. For many, many years, I was very hesitant to build an imprint device for the Avatar. And quite honestly, it cost me a lot of sales because doctors wanted that technology. They wanted to be able to make a remedy on the fly, custom for their patients. But I didn't believe it because the way that people were explaining this, talking about these frequencies of remedies and so on, it was just kind of too loose. When we started working on the Wavefront, and I spoke to Dr. Ludwig in Germany, Andreas made me fly over to Germany with him, and it was a great opportunity. Always remember that. And when I was there, I asked Dr. Ludwig, about a lot of things about the Wavefront, but I said, well, if we're going to build this, it may be a very good platform for developing an imprint circuit. And I said, no, look, I'm very cautious about this. I want to make sure that I understand this and I'm selling something that's not some kind of a flaky deal here.
It's not a black box.
Yeah, just some kind of a goofy gadget, And he said, well, I'm not familiar with this. He said, what is it? And I kind of explained how these other devices worked. And boy, his eyes just lit up. He says, this is very fascinating. And I said, well, the thing is given what I really know about what's really going on with these devices, I don't understand it. And he goes, well, that doesn't mean that it's not working.
That's right.
And I said, well, before I can do this commercially and sell it, I've got to prove it. And I said, how can I do that and filter out placebo effect? How can I actually test to make sure that it's working without having a placebo influence like you would on human subjects? He said, try it in animals. Animals don't have a placebo effect. Animals, you can't change the belief of what an animal feels and therefore change the outcome of their condition. So we set up a prototype. We set up 2 of them. And we made a prototype of the software and made 2 simple devices. And I had a couple of friends of mine that I knew worked on animals. One of them was a good friend of both of ours. And they actually tried it where the rules of the game were they had to use the avatar to do EAV testing, go through the whole process, the ritual of that. And then the only remedies they could use in these cases were imprinted remedies, nothing else. And they had to have clear-cut, decisive evidence that it was working. And what they found is consistently it worked incredibly. Now that blew my mind because from what I understand, there's nothing kind of tangible going on there, nothing I could get my hands wrapped or my mind wrapped around. And yet here the outcome was something that was really occurring for real where there was no placebo. So there really is something to this imprinting. So nobody really knows how this works, and I'm okay with that because it's been proven to me, not just by that experiment, by hundreds and hundreds of reportings from people using this who do imprinting day in and day out, and they get remarkable results. Is it going to be the thing that's going to always turn everything around?
No, that's just...
No, it's not. But sometimes it can be that little bit that can sometimes just get things moving or get things over the hump to get things really going. Or sometimes it can really target the effort of that patient's body towards fighting something very specific. That's the Wavefront 3000. There are a couple last things I'd like to mention before we close. One of them is just in general about using this device, something that we kind of mentioned strongly before. But if you're new at using this, don't let yourself get too frustrated with things. It's a difficult technique to learn, but you know what? Anybody can learn this if you just apply yourself. Yeah. Use these lessons, get some good training so you start off with a good foundation, and really work through the frustration. If you keep with it, you'll get over it, just like riding a bike.
Well, the benefit outweighs the frustration you go through. And it may be not even frustrating, because it's very fascinating. And the first time you get some result or you discover something, it will ignite a whole new horizon.
It is. In the course of this training video, we haven't mentioned a lot of the capabilities of what the device can do. For example, virtual testing. We didn't cover that here for a couple reasons. One, we really wanted to stick to the basics of some of the mechanics of point testing, some of the real fundamentals of this for right now, the real basics of remedy testing. Now, as a suggestion, one thing that I found helps with people that are starting to learn this is try and make this process as simple as possible at first. Something you don't have to think about too much. For example, when you're getting going, for some people, not all, sometimes it's very distracting if they're trying to test everything virtually in the device, because they're fumbling around the software, they're not used to where things are, they don't remember which sequence of mouse clicks they're supposed to do, how did it all work. It just distracts from what's important, which is getting good readings, figuring out how the meridians are responding, then doing your basic remedy testing. So I really recommend something to really help people get started with remedy testing is use real remedies. Use the little, test samples like this. A lot of companies out there have these now because they're so valuable. If not, it's great to use the full-size bottles. Hand me one of those, will you please, Andreas? Thank you. So, here's from a couple manufacturers. Don't worry that they're in plastic. Don't worry that they're sealed. The energetic patterns are all available to, like Andreas said, the autonomic nervous system, to your energetic field. Crazy. There's something also very valuable about testing remedies in this way in terms of your patient is when you set a remedy like this on the plate and they see the reading come down to where it's supposed to be, it's a very powerful mechanism. Yeah. they start taking remedies, you know, over the course of time and working with you, and they get to where they see a remedy in this bottle, do that to a reading, they're going home with this remedy. It's a very powerful thing in terms of compliance. So, and it also teaches you to get started the energetic connection of, and also the mechanics, the logical mechanics of, if I'm testing a specific meridian, I want to take a liver remedy, put it on the plate, go back to that liver point and test it again. So using the software is something we can teach you later, and will teach you later, with very detailed videos of how the software works and how you can use that. Those are coming soon for Avatar 5.0. For right now, we want to stick with the basics, give you something you can get your hands and your head, you know, get everything on it so you can really start putting this to use.
Thank you.
So everybody that's watching this, we want to thank you. We really appreciate that you're using this technology, hopefully putting it to good use and really enjoying it. Thank you very much.
And thank you.